It happened years ago. A brief encounter between my young daughter and a complete stranger. But to this day, I still believe that it was the greatest act of kindness that I have ever seen. When my children were growing up, we frequently went to Chicago to visit my friend Lynn and her two boys who lived there. And every time that we went, we tried to do something different, right? So we went to the aquarium one time, and we went to Navy Pier at different times, and we took a sailboat out onto Lake Michigan, and we took the book tour that you could take through Chicago, the architectural tour that you could go through there. But this time, it was especially special because my daughter was 7 years old, and we did what every 7-year-old wants to do when you go to Chicago. We went to the American Girl doll store.
Yes.
So my friend Lynn, who had two boys, graciously took my son with her and her two boys, and they went to the Lego store for obvious reasons, right? And my daughter and I then had time to go to the store by ourselves. So we went into the American Girl store, and we did everything that you could possibly do in this store. We looked at the clothes that you can buy for the dolls, and we looked at the clothes that you can buy when you're 7 years old that match your doll's clothes. And we did high tea, and we did a photo session and everything. We did everything that you could do, right? I don't even know how much money we dropped at the American Girl store, but I will tell you it's quite a lot, because you cannot walk into the American Girl store and not spend money, okay? So whenever we got done and we were leaving, I was super excited for two reasons. One, because I could finally leave the American Girl store, right? It's crazy in there. But anyway, the second reason why I was super excited was because now we got to go to my favorite store. See, my son got the Lego store, Gracie got the American Girl store, but now it was Mama's turn. And now I got to go shopping. And now we were gonna go to Pottery Barn. So we head towards Pottery Barn. I'm super excited. I'm dragging my 7-year-old daughter behind me, and we get within feet of the door of Pottery Barn, and my daughter stops dead in her tracks on the sidewalk, just feet away from me going into my favorite store. And I can't get her to come with me. I'm tugging her, and I can't get her to come with me. And I look down, and I try to see what she's looking at, and I realize that my daughter is standing there, and she was looking at a lady who was sitting on the sidewalk, who was holding a sign. And the only way that I can think to describe this woman to you is by telling you that she was broken, because her shoulders were heavy and her head was heavy as she sat there and she looked at the little patch of concrete that was in front of her. She was fixated with this patch of concrete in front of her, and there was a container that was there that, you know, pedestrians had thrown change and bills and whatever in there, and a few of them had. But it looked like that she was carrying every bad decision that had been made on her back and every bad thing that had happened to her by somebody else on her back. She was just broken, and she just sat there. And I pulled my daughter, and I'm like, come on, we gotta go into Pottery Barn. Yeah. So we went into Pottery Barn, and Gracie, who's here tonight, by the way, Gracie, I was visibly shaken by this, and I knew, I could see her little mind was just working. And she asked me if she could have the money that was left over from our excursion to the American Girl store so that she could give it to this lady. And I said, sure, you can do that. So I reached into my pocket and I pulled out $4. And Gracie and I went together and we went out to give it to this woman. But instead of just dropping it into the container that was there on the sidewalk in front of this woman, Gracie stood there and she just looked at her. And after a few moments, this woman lifted her head and she made eye contact with my daughter. And it was as if, in that moment in time, at least in my mind, everything stopped. There were no more cars on Michigan Avenue. There were no more pedestrians that were walking around. There was no noise. It was just this connection that was happening between two people that couldn't be further apart in this world than my daughter and this woman. And my daughter stood there and looked at her, and my daughter handed this woman the money. And as she did so, she smiled. And this woman, who was carrying the weight of I don't know how many different stories on her back, smiled back at my daughter, and she mouthed what was written on her sign. She said, "God bless you." And I really wish to this day that there was somebody else that was with me that could have witnessed what had happened. Because it wasn't just my daughter giving this lady money. It was my daughter, it was look on that lady's face when she realized that my daughter was not only looking at her, but that my daughter was seeing her. Can you imagine how many people had passed by that woman on any given day and hadn't seen this woman? But in that moment in time, my daughter saw that woman. Later that night, Gracie was crying. She was upstairs and I heard her crying. I went up to check on her and she was still thinking about this lady, and she kept asking, "Do you think I did enough? Do you think I did enough?" And I couldn't figure out how to tell her, "Gracie, I think you did more than enough." Because in one brief moment of time, my daughter met the most basic human need that everybody has. And it cost far less than $4.